Good afternoon, Eagles Nation. Something important is quietly building inside the Philadelphia Eagles, and if you've been paying close attention, you can feel that this isn't just another routine offseason storyline. This is about pressure, expectations, and a defining moment for one of the most talented players on this roster. Jalen Carter is entering a year that could shape not only his future in Philadelphia, but also the financial structure of the entire defensive tackle market across the league. Here's the reality that not everyone is openly saying yet. The Eagles are not rushing to extend him, and that alone tells you everything about how delicate this situation really is. This is a franchise that usually locks in its cornerstone players early, especially when they believe someone is a long-term pillar. But with Carter, there's hesitation. Not because of talent, because when he's at his peak, he's one of the most disruptive forces in football, but because the organization is still asking one key question. Can he sustain that level consistently, both physically and mentally? Think back to that dominant 2024 run. That version of Jalen Carter wasn't just good, he was game-wrecking. He led all players in pressures during the playoff stretch, played a massive number of snaps, and delivered in the biggest moments, including a critical play against Matthew Stafford that helped seal a championship run. That's the version of Carter that puts him in conversations with elite names like Aaron Donald, Fletcher Cox, and Chris Jones. But then came 2025, and things got complicated. It wasn't a collapse, but it also wasn't dominance. A suspension before the season even properly started raised eyebrows. Moments of immaturity popped up again, and while they weren't constant, they were enough to keep the front office cautious. On the field, the production dipped. Just 3 sacks, a noticeable drop from what you expect from someone with his ability. And while stats don't tell the whole story, they do matter when you're talking about a contract that could reset the market. There's also the physical side of this. Carter carried a massive workload during that Super Bowl run, and it showed the following season. Injuries, wear and tear, and conditioning all played a role. By the time he was fully healthy again later in the year, you could see flashes return, especially in that dominant performance against Josh Allen, where he completely disrupted the game. That version of Carter, still elite, still terrifying for opposing offenses. And that's where the Eagles' dilemma really begins. Because if you pay him now, you're not just paying for what he's done, you're betting on what he will be for the next 5 to 7 years. You're committing to a contract that could redefine the position financially, and if there's even a small doubt about consistency, conditioning, or long-term discipline, that decision becomes incredibly risky. At the same time, there's a strong belief inside the building, and honestly, you can feel it, that Carter is about to respond in a big way. Everything points to 2026 being a bounce-back year. A fully healthy start, no suspension distractions, and a clear motivation prove he deserves that massive deal. This is the kind of season where players either solidify themselves as generational talents or leave teams second-guessing everything. And let's be honest, the talent has never been the issue. The question is whether he can bring that top-tier level every single week, not just in flashes or big moments. Because if he does, there won't be any more hesitation. The Eagles will have no choice but to pay him, and pay him big. But if there's inconsistency again, if the numbers don't match the impact, or if the off-field concerns resurface even slightly, then this becomes one of the most complicated contract decisions this franchise has faced in years. So now it all comes down to this season. Motivation shouldn't be a problem. The opportunity is right in front of him. The expectations are clear. And the Eagles are watching closely, probably closer than ever. The question is, when this season ends, will the Eagles feel confident enough to make Jalen Carter the highest paid defensive tackle in football, or will they still have doubts? And right behind that situation, there's another storyline developing that might actually define how far this defense can go in 2026. Because while all eyes are on Jalen Carter and his contract future, there's a player in the secondary who is quietly putting himself in position to become the best overall player on this roster, and that's Quinyon Mitchell. What he did last season wasn't just impressive, it was rare. You're talking about a corner who, in just his second year, played at a first-team All-Pro level and became the most consistent piece of a defense that carried this team to a division title. In a league where consistency at cornerback is one of the hardest things to find, Mitchell didn't just hold his own, he took over games. And here's what makes it even more dangerous for the rest of the NFL. He hasn't even peaked yet. When you turn on the tape from 2025, you see a player who already dominates in press man coverage, who has the physicality to challenge top receivers snap after snap, and the athleticism to recover even when he's slightly out of position. Against elite wideouts, he didn't just compete, he erased them for stretches. That's not something you say lightly at this level. But the most surprising part, despite all that that dominance, he still hasn't translated those performances into regular season interceptions. Think about that for a second. A player already performing at an elite level, already shaping games, and there's still a major statistical category where he hasn't even scratched the surface. Because when the lights get brighter, when the pressure increases, that's when he flips the switch. In the playoffs, he's been a completely different animal. Big moments, tight games, high stakes, and suddenly, the ball finds him. Multiple interceptions in critical situations, plays that shift momentum instantly, performances that show you exactly what he's capable of becoming on a consistent basis. It's almost like the regular season has been the setup, and the postseason reveals the real version of him. Now imagine if that starts showing up from week 1, if Mitchell begins turning those tight coverages into takeaways, if he starts flipping field position regularly, this defense doesn't just stay good, it becomes dominant on another level, because turnovers change everything. They shorten the field, they create easy points, and they break the rhythm of opposing offenses. And he has all the tools to become one of the league's best at doing exactly that. But there's also a strategic question the Eagles are going to have to answer, and it's not a small one. Do you continue using him as a shadow corner, following the opponent's best receiver across the field? Or do you trust the depth you've built in the secondary and keep him on one side, allowing the defense to stay more structured and unpredictable? Because now the situation is different. The addition of Rick Woolen gives this team another high-level option on the outside, someone who can hold his own in man coverage. Inside, Cooper DeJean has already proven he can be a difference maker in the slot. This isn't a secondary that needs to hide anyone anymore. This is a group that can dictate matchups instead of reacting to them, and that changes everything about how you deploy your best corner. If you let Mitchell stay on one side, you create a balanced structure that makes it harder for quarterbacks to read pre-snap. But if you let him shadow, you maximize his impact against elite receivers. It's a classic trade-off between control and chaos, and the decision could define how effective this defense is against top-tier offenses. Now, while those two players bring star power and headlines, there's another piece of this defense that might be just as important even if he doesn't get nearly the same attention. Zach Bond has quietly become one of the most reliable and complete linebackers on this team, and maybe even one of the most underrated players in the entire league. What makes his story so unique is how quickly he proved that his breakout wasn't a fluke. After an all-pro season, a lot of players struggled to replicate that level, but Bond came back in 2025 and did it again. Over 120 tackles, impact plays in coverage, production as a blitzer, he checked every box. According to grading metrics, he remained among the top linebackers in football, especially in coverage, where his ability to read plays and react quickly stands out every single week. And now, his role becomes even bigger. With the departure of a key leader at linebacker, Bond isn't just a top performer anymore. He's the anchor of that unit, the communication, the adjustments, the leadership in the middle of the field. It all runs through him now. And while he's still in his prime physically, this is the kind of transition that tests whether a player can elevate from great to indispensable. The presence of a younger linebacker next to him adds another layer to this story. There's potential there, but it's still developing, and that means Bond's consistency becomes even more critical. He's the one who stabilizes everything, the one who ensures that the defense doesn't lose structure when things get chaotic. So when you step back and look at the bigger picture, you start to see how all of this connects. Carter represents the ceiling of the defensive line, the player who can completely take over games if he reaches his peak again. Mitchell represents the future of the secondary, a player who is already elite but still has another level to unlock. And Bond represents the foundation in the middle, the steady presence that keeps everything functioning at a high level. If all three hit their peak at the same time, this isn't just a good defense. This is a unit that can carry a team deep into the postseason again. But that's the big if, isn't it? Because now it's not about potential anymore. It's about execution, consistency, and proving that last year wasn't the ceiling. It was just the beginning. So as we head into this season with contracts looming, expectations rising, and roles evolving, the question becomes unavoidable. Are we about to witness this Eagles defense take another step into dominance, or are there cracks forming that could hold them back when it matters most? And that's where everything tightens even more, because once you start looking at this defense as a whole, you realize it's no longer about isolated performances. It's about whether all these pieces can align at the Exact same time. Take Jalen Carter again for a second. If he delivers on that expected bounce back and returns to that dominant 2024 level, it changes how offenses approach the Eagles entirely. Protection schemes shift, double teams increase, and suddenly the rest of the defensive line starts seeing more one-on-one opportunities. That ripple effect alone can elevate the entire front. Now combine that with a version of Quinyon Mitchell who starts turning elite coverage into actual takeaways in the regular season. That's when you start seeing short fields for the offense, momentum swings, and games being decided by defensive plays instead of just offensive execution. And in the middle of all that, you have Zach Bond acting as the stabilizer, the player who doesn't need headlines but quietly ensures everything functions the way it should. The one making sure assignments are correct, gaps are filled, and mistakes don't turn into explosive plays. That kind of presence becomes even more valuable when the expectations rise and every small error gets magnified. But here's the part that fans really need to understand. This isn't just about talent anymore. This is about timing, because the NFL doesn't wait for you to figure things out. Windows close fast, contracts force decisions, players evolve, regress, or leave. And right now, the Eagles are in that delicate space where they have the pieces, but they still need confirmation that those pieces can deliver together consistently under pressure. That's why 2026 feels different. It's not just another season, it's an evaluation year for the future of this defense. If Carter proves he deserves that market-setting deal, if Mitchell takes that next statistical leap, if Bond maintains his elite consistency while anchoring a transitioning linebacker group, then suddenly the Eagles aren't just contenders, they're building something sustainable again. But if even one of those elements falls short, the front office is forced into tough decisions. Do you commit massive money? Do you adjust the structure of the defense? Do you start preparing for replacements earlier than expected? Those are the kinds of questions that don't show up on game day broadcasts, but they shape everything behind the scenes. And that's why this season is going to tell us so much more than just wins and losses. It's going to tell us if this defensive core is truly ready to define the next era of Eagles football, or if changes are coming sooner than anyone expected. So now it's on them. Every snap, every game, every moment, it all builds toward that answer. And even beyond all of that, there's one more layer that makes this situation even more intense: internal competition and expectations inside the locker room itself. Because when you have players like Jalen Carter, Quinyon Mitchell, and Zach Bond all operating at high levels, it naturally raises the standard for everyone else around them. This isn't just about individual growth anymore. It's about setting a tone across the entire defense. Young players are watching Carter to see how he responds to pressure. Are they going to see a player locked in, disciplined, and dominant week after week? Or are they going to see inconsistency creep in again? That matters more than people realize, because leadership isn't always about speeches. It's about example. At the same time, Mitchell's rise is forcing offenses to make uncomfortable decisions, and that creates opportunities for teammates. If quarterbacks start avoiding his side of the field, others have to step up and capitalize. That's how elite defenses are built. Not just one shutdown player, but a unit that punishes offenses no matter where they go. And then there's Bound, who might quietly be the most important piece in keeping everything connected. When things get chaotic, when offenses try to exploit mismatches, when adjustments need to be made on the fly, he's the one making sure the structure holds. That kind of role doesn't always show up in highlights, but it's often the difference between a good defense and a championship level one. So now everything circles back to the same idea: alignment, not just talent, not just potential, but all of it coming together at the same time, in the same season, under the same expectations.